We all have an ego. It's just part of what makes us human. And basically our ego is just our sense of self, or how we interpret what's going on in our environment, what's going on around us in relation to who we are. It's the filter of what we make circumstances, situations, and interactions mean about us. Having an ego is not right or wrong or good or bad. It just is. And so you may have heard some people talking about how to kill the ego, how to abolish the ego. But I don't think that that should be our goal, because you can't kill the ego. It's just part of being human. But what we can do is learn how to tame our egos, how to manage our egos, how to be aware of when the ego is flaring up so that we don't let it take over and create problems for us or get us into a whole bunch of unnecessary struggle, which is what the ego can often do. And so today I'm going to talk about 7 different ways that you can tame the ego so that, again, it's not taking over or holding you back or getting in your way and causing issues and difficulties for you that are actually pretty easily avoidable. The things I'm going to teach are simple, but they are deep and not always easy to implement. So to not worry if you're like, after this, wow, this was a lot, where do I start? The answer is, it doesn't matter. Start with whatever feels most doable and achievable and reasonable for you right now. That's going to be your best bet for having success and growth, is if you do the things that feel the most doable, given wherever you're at in your life, in your growth, in your healing process right now. If you're new here, welcome to our incredible little corner on the internet. Please do introduce yourself in the comment section below. And if you are back again, I am so glad to have you back again. Thank you so much for continuing to show up and doing this work with me. Either way, my name is Kristina, and I'm a registered clinical therapist, a researcher, a coach, and the creator of my membership program, The Shift Society, which you can get more information about in the description below as well. I help heart-centered go-getter men and women break through the crap that is holding them back so that they can like themselves and their lives more every day. And before we go on, make sure you hit the subscribe button. I think it's about right down there so that you get notifications when my new videos come out. And for those of you who are my loyal community here on YouTube, we've been doing this ego series. This is not where we're starting with ego. So you can go back and watch. There's 2 other videos on ego that we've started with, and this is the progression through that. This is the 3rd video in this ego series. So if this is a whole new concept for you, I would recommend at least going back and watching the video that's 2 videos back from now. Starting there to get a bit of a deeper understanding about what the ego is before you watch this one. Or you can watch this one, go back and watch that one, and then come back and watch this one. Or you can do whatever you want, because it is your life and your choice. So let's talk about this ego stuff and how to manage it. Because yes, absolutely, this is, if left unchecked, our egos can absolutely run our lives in a lot of ways, kind of start to ruin our lives if we don't get it in check, if we don't learn how to manage it. Because like I said, our ego is our sense of self. And our ego can often puff up if we're feeling threatened, or it can shrink down even if we're feeling threatened, or it can resist if we are feeling threatened. Because like I talked about in that other video, our ego is just really about trying to protect us from vulnerability. It's this shield that we put up to try to protect us from shame and vulnerability. And so it does. It shows up and it acts up, and it actually ends up creating more problems for us because it prevents us from showing up authentically. It prevents us from showing up without defensiveness, with openness, with curiosity. The ego can really get in the way and prevent all of those things. And so I'm going to talk about what to do about it. And the first thing that we can do, and this is a really simple one, but sometimes it's amazing how hard it is for many of us, me included, I've had to really work on this part, is to be open to learning. To be open to learning new things, even if you don't totally agree. Even if you think you already know everything about a certain thing, allowing yourself to be open and listen before you jump into the yeah buts, before you speak over and talk about why this doesn't apply to you, or why you don't need to learn this, or why this isn't relevant. Just allowing ourselves to be open to listening first, to be able to receive without discounting, to be able to take in new information and really let it sit for a second before we decide that it may not be for us. And that's completely fair. This isn't saying that you have to agree with and get on board with everything that you hear, everything that you listen to, everything that you learn. But it is about being able to take a step back and listen. We so often are so quick to speak before we actually listen. We're so quick to push away before we're able to just sit with and reflect on and decide, making a conscious decision without the ego threat getting in the way, without our ego feeling threatened that something new means bad. And so often that's what the human brain does. That's what the ego does, is it thinks that new is a threat to my current state. Something that's new is a threat to my current understanding. And so I have to push it away, instead of being able to take a breath and a step back and see, is this something that I could consider? Is this something that I could be open to? And if not, that's completely fine. But at least I've given myself a second to consciously and curiously look at it. The next thing is to not put all of our eggs in the outcome basket. And I'm going to be honest with you, this is something that I've worked on a lot in the last couple years, because I am a goal-oriented person. I like moving forward. I like setting goals. I like reaching goals, and I love growing. But what I started to find was that I was doing these things, I was reaching these goals, and I was pushing, and then getting to the goal, and then being like, great, celebrate for like 5 minutes, and then, okay, on to the next thing. And what I realized is my life became, in a lot of ways, just living for these moments of goal reaching. And I was missing everything else in between. And so I was kind of just missing out on life and only experiencing these few moments of joy and celebration when the goal is reached. And the rest of it kind of just went unnoticed. Or at least maybe I thought that, I just had to struggle for all this time, and now I've got to this thing and now I can feel good. And I think so often we forget to allow ourselves to enjoy the struggle, and to maybe not even see it as struggle, but to see it as growth and evolving and learning. And I've talked about this in one of my videos before, that what I've learned and what has completely changed the game for me is understanding and knowing that the point of a goal is not to reach the goal. Which so often we think, being in a very capitalistic and sort of patriarchal society that really values like success and power and wealth and like all of these like big goals, all of these big things that we think we need to get to and achieve and accomplish, and then we'll be happy and fulfilled and satisfied. And as you know, that is not the way that it works for anyone. That rich, successful, powerful people are not fundamentally happier people than just regular old folks. It's just not the way that it works. But we think it is, and we try so hard to get it, which is why the bar keeps raising and we keep having to push and go, because we think, well, I just need to do a little bit more. Well, I just need, maybe this wasn't quite enough. I just need to do it, bigger, better, and faster and in less time, and then I'll feel satisfied. So the point of a goal is not to reach the goal. The point of having a goal, having a dream, is about what we need to learn, how we need to grow, what we need to unlearn, how we can expand in that process. And even what do we need to overcome? What do we need to overcome in order to have that next level of growth, that next level of understanding, even that next level of success in whatever way you define success. So what do you need to overcome? And the kind of secret is in life, it's all process. We think that it's about achievement, right? That life is about achievement, but it's not. Our lives are a continuous state of process with moments of achievement. And so if we ignore the process, we're basically ignoring like 90%, if not more, maybe 90, even 99%. I don't know the exact stats. I'm just making this up, but you know the point. The large majority of our life, we are missing out on the whole thing if we don't allow ourselves to be in and present with and even grateful for the process. The next way to tame our ego is to let ourselves be beginners over and over again. And I'm not going to lie to you, this is the best part of my job because I teach new people all the time these concepts from the beginning. And so I get to relearn it. It's a little bit selfish on my part because I get to relearn the foundational stuff over and over again. And the foundational information, the foundational tools, the foundational understandings are what build the solid foundation. That's what makes us unwavering. That's what makes us solid, is to go back to the beginner's mind, to go back to the beginner's process, to go back again, even in my Shift Society. So for those of you who are in the Shift Society, you know this, that there is a core foundational teaching in there about how to learn how the specific tools and skills to manage our minds and emotions. And it's a series of 8 different lessons that everyone who's in the Shift Society goes through. And then at the end, I say, okay, now that you've gone through this, go back to the beginning and do it again. Because this foundational stuff, the first kind of steps, those first kind of major areas are what we need to have so good and solid before we can build any kind of structure that is going to be solid, that is going to be unwavering, that is going to withstand the storm and the weather and any kind of thing that kind of tries to come in and tear it down. We need that strong foundation, which is also something that I learned a lot from my husband. So my husband is all about beginner's mind. And by the way, he's like the least egotistical person that I've ever met. I don't know what it is about this man, but he does not have a big ego at all. I don't even think some people are just born like that. Let's just say that. Some people are born just sort of easygoing and just more even-keeled. And some of us have had to work on it. But he has no shame or embarrassment in going back and doing the foundational stuff in whatever it comes to. If it comes to sports, if it comes to dance, he's an engineer. So if it comes to engineering, going back and learning the foundational stuff, letting yourself be a beginner time and time again. And I remember, so he and I, we met when we were swing dancing. This was a long time ago. Oh my gosh, it was almost 20 years ago that we met when swing dancing was a big thing. Wait, what was that? Back in like the early-ish 2000s? Yeah, about the early 2000s swing dancing. And he was a really good swing dancer. And I was brand new and he was really good. And a few years in, we would dance together and learn together and stuff. And a few years into our dancing together, he said, let's go back and take a beginner's class. I think we need to go back and take a beginner's class and really just clean up the basics. Because when you have the basics good and solid and nice and cleaned up, then you just become a cleaner, better dancer overall. So letting yourself be a beginner. I know it's so often we think like, okay, I just got to get to the next step. I just need to get further on. I just need to go to and do the next thing, which is completely fine. But also letting ourselves go back and be a beginner time and time again. And then the next one, the 4th way to tame the ego, which I think is the most important one, is to work on putting defensiveness aside. That so often the ego is trying to protect that vulnerable sense of self. Not our authentic sense of self, but this shame-based sense of self that takes everything as a personal affront, that takes everything personally, that makes things about us and about our worth as a human being. That any bit of criticism, any bit of judgment, any bit of sideways glances, we make it about us. that we make it that there's something wrong with us. And so then we get defensive. And so I want to invite you to get curious instead of defensive. If someone has done something, if someone has said something, notice the defensiveness showing up, and then take a breath and a step back and ask yourself, what am I trying to protect? I am defending against something, but what is feeling threatening? And what am I trying to protect? And is this a real threat, or is this an ego threat? And I go a lot more into that in the last video that I did. So you can go back and watch that one about ego fear versus real fear. But really getting a handle on defensiveness, I think so often, present company included, we get defensive far too easily instead of just taking a breath and a step back and getting curious and reflecting and saying, what am I getting defensive about? And does this need to be defended? Because I think that if you haven't done anything wrong, and if you know you haven't done anything wrong, then there's nothing to defend. And if you have done something wrong, then again, there's nothing to defend. There's just accountability, responsibility, and apology. But the defensiveness shows up when we think we've done something wrong, but we don't want to admit it because we think that somehow that it's going to mean that something negative about us as a human being. Not that I made a mistake, but more so that I am a mistake. That shame shows up. And so the defensiveness is our ego's way of trying to protect us from shame. So really working on that one, getting curious when defensiveness shows up. And then the next one is to work on quieting the brain and not overthinking everything. Again, overthinking is about the ego trying to protect us from vulnerability. If I can anticipate, if I can project, if I can plan for, if I can prevent any bit of mistake or failure or anything, any kind of undesirable outcome in any way, then I'll be okay. And so we overthink it. We stress ourselves out. We make ourselves anxious and worried and overwhelmed with overthinking things in order to try and protect us from being uncomfortable, which is kind of ironic because we make ourselves terribly uncomfortable, stressing and worrying and obsessing in order to prevent ourselves from maybe possibly becoming uncomfortable with an outcome that we don't want. And so working to quiet the brain, working to know and really just kind of realize and connect with the truth that we can handle when things don't go our way, that it doesn't mean something about us as a human being if we have a failure, if we make a mistake, even if someone corrects us or criticizes us, that we don't have to overthink and try and make ourselves beyond criticism or reproach or failure or rejection. And that's what we're trying to do when we're overthinking instead of letting ourselves make mistakes, letting things not go our way, and knowing that we're going to be able to have our own backs if they do not go our way, if they don't turn out the way that we want them to. If overthinking is something that you do struggle with, I have a free 10-minute guided mindfulness audio that is in the description that you can grab, that you can listen to. It's really going to help you just be able to take a step back and not get so caught up in the hamster wheel thoughts that so many among us struggle with. So grab that, make sure you get it, and it's for free in the description below. And now the sixth way to get our egos in check. And this one is a really big cliche. I am so aware of how big of a cliche that it is, but it is also so incredibly important. And this one is to let yourself be yourself, to not pretend to be something other than who you are as your authentic self. And I know so often this one is really hard because most of us were raised to believe, we were either taught or told or observed or absorbed or socialized to believe that you need to be or become something or someone else in order to be good enough, in order to be worthy of love and belonging. And so we do. The ego tells us that you need to be this larger than life person. You need to have all these things. You need to look like this. You need to accomplish this. You need to achieve this in order to feel good about yourself. But you've seen people who have achieved big things. You've seen people that have accomplished big things. You've seen people that have, like we talked about, achieved those goals. And they still don't feel good about who they are on the inside. So doing that inner work to become who you are in your full authenticity. And this is the work that we're doing in the Shift Society. This is a big part of that work, is getting rid of that, peeling back the layers, peeling back the stuff, the thoughts, beliefs, ideas, programming that we've spent years observing and absorbing and replaying. And we're learning how to undo that. We're learning how to get rid of that. We're learning how to peel back so that we can be our authentic selves without letting the ego flare up, without letting all of these other things get in our way and hold us back and make us feel small and insecure and anxious. That's the work we're doing. So make sure you get on the wait list for the Shift Society. That's right down there in the description. And now our final way to keep the ego in check. And again, this is a tough one, and it might be a bit of a tough one to hear, but just watch the defensiveness. That's the ego. Is to don't allow everything to be about you, because that's what the ego does. The ego makes everything about us, other people's opinions, other people's criticisms, other people's feedback. We take it as a personal affront, even if it's just about the person not liking something that we did or said or walked or blinked or whatever that is. I don't know what it is, but we take that feedback personally, we make it about us. The ego is very self-centered. It's very much about filtering everything and making it about us. And so understanding, even if someone does something that is unthoughtful, that is uncaring, that is insensitive, maybe even rude or nasty or whatever that is, understanding that it is not about you. That every single human being is going through this world functioning at their current level of awareness. That people only can do what they can do based on what they have learned, based on where they are in their healing and growth process. And I know there are so many people that we wish could be doing better, but they're not. And so letting that not be about us. I get nasty comments all the time. I get nasty comments on my Instagram. I get nasty comments on my Facebook page. I get nasty comments here on YouTube. But I get that people are just showing up in their current state of awareness from whatever it is that they have going on. That's what any of us can ever do. I look back on some of the ways that I used to behave, the ways that I used to handle things, the way I used to understand things. I look back on my own defensiveness, by my own taking everything personally. And I could judge that person and I could be like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with her? That's so pathetic. Or I could say, hey, past self, that's where you were at based on your current level of awareness. And that's all that anyone can do. And so understanding, I've talked about this before, that nothing is personal, that people are projecting from their own current state of understanding and awareness. And I know it's not always easy, but letting that sink in. And so that we don't need to get defensive. The ego doesn't need to defend against these things that are not actual threats. They are only threats to the ego. They are not threats to our authentic self. If we know who we are authentically, if we've done our ego work and we know who we are, our authentic selves underneath that, then that is that solid foundation that is very hard to knock over. This is the work we're doing in the Shift Society. Come and join us in there. Let me know what of this you found helpful, what connected, what made sense. I would love to hear that in the comments section below. It is always so good to have you here. Subscribe to the channel. If you liked this and got something out of it, please do like it, because that helps it get in front of more people just because of the algorithm, and also share it out. That also helps it get in front of more people so that more people can have access to this kind of transformational work. So good to have you here. Until next time, take good care.